Have you ever encountered someone who once made your heart flutter in a completely unimaginable situation? If one day the person who used to laugh at you now needs you the most, would you turn your back or reach out your hand? An arrogant millionaire sees the girl he once idolized, the same girl who once mocked him now begging on the street with two small 3-year-old twin girls, and he recognizes her instantly. But what he does next is truly unbelievable. To begin the story, comment below which city you're watching from. It was a bleak winter morning in New York. The bitter wind swept through every street, howling between skyscrapers, as if trying to sweep away all signs of life. Brandon Hayes, a cold, arrogant real estate millionaire, had just stepped out of his sleek black Bentley. As usual, he wore a designer suit and a perfectly knotted tie, walking with the aura of a man who had never lost a battle. But everything froze when he glanced back at the corner of 48th Street. A woman sat curled up on the sidewalk. Her hair was matted, her face dirty, and her tattered coat was far from enough to fend off the cold. Beside her were two little girls about 4 years old, their faces frozen stiff, hands and feet trembling. One of the girls was softly crying. The other clung tightly to her mother, her eyes blank and full of fear. There. Someone will help us soon. Just a little longer." The mother's voice was faint and hoarse from the cold hunger and despair, but still full of love. Brandon stood frozen. That look, that voice. There was no mistaking it. It was Jasmine Cole, the girl who used to be the queen of Westdale High School, the one who once treated Brandon as if he were invisible, who mocked him for his worn-out backpack and scuffed shoes, the girl he had secretly loved for 3 years without ever saying a word. And now she was sitting curled up on the sidewalk, as if life had drained her of everything she ever had. Brandon swallowed hard. His heart tightened in a strange mixture of bitterness and sorrow. He stepped forward. "Jasmine," he called gently. The woman didn't lift her head. "Jasmine." This time his voice was more unmistakable, more certain. She looked up. Her eyes were dull, confused. She recognized him. Her expression froze. "Brandon," her voice cracked. At that moment, the world seemed to freeze. They stared at each other, two people who once belonged to opposite worlds. But no one smiled. No one said anything else. Jasmine immediately lowered her head, clutching her two daughters tightly, as if afraid they'd be taken away. "What happened to you?" Brandon asked, stepping closer. "It doesn't matter. We're fine." "You should go," she replied, without looking him in the eye. Brandon looked at the two girls. One was shaking. The other bit her lip, holding back tears. Their mother was gaunt, hopeless. "This isn't fine," he said, his voice deepening. "Come with me. At least for tonight. You and your daughters need a place to sleep." "No, I can't. You don't have to do this." Jasmine shook her head quickly, her eyes brimming with tears. "I want to do this," Brandon replied firmly, his gaze unwavering. "I won't let you and your daughters freeze to death on these streets." Jasmine was silent. Her trembling hand rested on little Hazel's head. In the end, with no other choice, she nodded. The black Mercedes rolled through the winter streets. No one said a word. Brandon glanced at Jasmine through the rearview mirror. She held her daughter eyes gazing out the window, as if reminding herself this was only a dream. "Mommy," Harper whispered. "Who is he? Are we staying here forever?" Jasmine burst into tears. She couldn't answer because she didn't know herself. Brandon heard. He said nothing, but his hands on the steering wheel clenched slightly. The Hayes mansion stood on the Upper East Side, where only names listed in Forbes were invited to parties. Brandon brought Jasmine and the children in through the back entrance, avoiding the eyes of staff and the media. He ordered a fully equipped private room, hot food, and new clothes. The housekeeper looked at Jasmine in shock, but Brandon said, They are my guests. Treat them like family. Jasmine and her 2 daughters sat by the fireplace. The dinner was simple, but warm. Hazel had fallen asleep on her mother's lap. Harper leaned against her shoulder. Jasmine looked up at Brandon, eyes red. "Thank you, but I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Brandon stood. "You don't owe me anything. Get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow." He left before Jasmine could say another word, because he knew if he stayed, he wouldn't be able to hold back his tears. Do you believe a random moment can change the course of a life? Is Brandon saving Jasmine? Or is Jasmine the one saving Brandon? If you believe in second chances, comment Destiny below. Faint sunlight slipped through the curtains. Jasmine woke up, unable to tell whether this was reality or a dream. She turned over. The 2 little girls were still sound asleep, their faces peaceful for the first time after many months of drifting from street to street. The room was warm. The blanket was thick. No more car horns. No more wind howling through plastic tarps. Jasmine looked around. A soft yellow night lamp, luxurious brown wooden cabinets, elegant decor. She was speechless. This belonged to another world, a place she never dared to dream of, much less imagine that she and her daughters would ever step into. Brandon was sitting at the dining table holding a cup of coffee, eyes on his laptop screen. When he heard footsteps, he looked up. "Good morning," he said, his voice gentler than usual. "Good morning." "I'm sorry for bothering you," Jasmine murmured. Brandon smiled, a rare smile. "You're not bothering me at all. On the contrary, I'm glad you and your daughters are here. Sit down. Have breakfast with me." Jasmine sat still, awkward. The 2 little girls were quickly drawn to the table. Toast, peanut butter, orange juice, and cereal, all luxuries to them. Harper chatted away excitedly about her torn doll. Hazel was still shy, but she started smiling. Jasmine sat nearby, eating just a little, her eyes quietly observing. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was trespassing in a place she didn't belong. After breakfast, the housekeeper took the girls to play in the backyard. Only the 2 adults remained, and an uncomfortable silence settled in. Brandon sat across from her, hands clasped together. "Jasmine, how long do you plan to stay here?" "I'll leave soon. Just a few days to find a job and a place to stay," she replied quickly. Brandon frowned. "You don't have to rush. You and your daughters can stay as long as you need." Jasmine shook her head, her voice tightening. I can't accept this kindness. I don't deserve it." Brandon stayed silent for a moment. He knew that anything he said now could make her feel pity, and that was what she feared most. "Jasmine, you may not know this, but back in the day when you walked past me in the hallway without even looking at me once, I used to think, if only I could do something for her someday. Now I have that chance, and I don't want to waste it." That evening, while Jasmine was changing her daughter's clothes, Hazel looked up at her mother and asked, "Mom, is he a good man?" Jasmine paused. After a moment, she answered, "Yes, he's kind to Mommy, and both of you." Harper chimed in. "Then, can we call him Uncle Brandon?" Jasmine forced a smile, but for the first time in years, her heart ached with a flicker of hope, even if she didn't dare believe it just yet. Night fell. Brandon stood on the second-floor balcony, gazing down at the garden. Warm lights bathed the trees in a golden glow. It was a heartbreakingly beautiful scene. Jasmine approached, her footsteps as soft as the wind. "I owe you an explanation." "About everything?" Brandon nodded. "I'm ready to listen." Jasmine took a deep breath. "Do you remember Troy Walker?" "My high school boyfriend." Brandon's hands clenched into fists. A familiar name he didn't want to hear again. "I got pregnant after graduation. When I told him Troy disappeared, I blocked my number. Vanished." My family told me to get an abortion. I couldn't do it. I was kicked out. My mom said I brought shame to them. Brandon stared at Jasmine without blinking. The story was more brutal than any nightmare he had ever imagined. Some mistakes crush people. But there are those like Jasmine who choose to stand up again, not for themselves, but for the little lives beside them. And Brandon? Perhaps he was no longer the forgotten boy of the past. Brandon sat in silence as Jasmine spoke. The story wasn't long, but every word felt like a blade slicing into the listener's heart. I once believed Troy was the only person I'd ever need. He was gentle, knew everything to say, and had a talent for deceiving trust. After graduating high school, Jasmine and Troy moved in together in a small apartment in the suburbs. It seemed like a fresh start. But everything changed the day Jasmine found out she was pregnant. He went silent. I didn't ask a thing. I just sent one message. Don't make a big deal out of this. I'm not ready to be a father. Don't come looking for me. Jasmine was 19 at the time with nothing to her name. No degree. No job. She went to her parents begging for forgiveness, pleading to come home. But all she received were cold stares. My mother said one thing. Don't show your face here with that belly. Do you want to be a mother? Then take care of yourself. Brandon gripped the balcony railing tightly, his face pale with anger. So what did you do? He asked softly. I left on my own. I found a job at a diner and crashed at a friend's. Pregnant with twins, I grew so thin I was skin and bones. On the day I gave birth, no one was there. Only the sound of two babies crying, Harper and Hazel, kept me from giving up. Jasmine had worked many jobs, waitressing, babysitting, cleaning. But everything began to spiral when the kids got sick and she had to take time off constantly. Her boss let her go. She couldn't pay rent. All three were kicked out onto the streets. We survived on charity. A loaf of bread and a warm place to sleep became luxuries. I never thought I'd see you again. Even less so like this. Brandon stood motionless. The image of the radiant Jasmine he once knew now overlapped with the wounded woman sitting before him. I wish back then you had seen me, so I could have done something. Jasmine gave a faint smile, though her eyes were red. Back then, I did see you, but I was too foolish to know what a good man looked like. While Brandon and Jasmine were talking, a faint camera flash flickered from the second-floor hallway. A little girl, Ellie, Brandon's daughter from his previous marriage, had witnessed everything, and the photo of the two sitting close together was immediately sent to someone else. Brandon's mother was a traditional iron-willed woman who once controlled the Hayes real estate empire. Brandon's phone buzzed. Who is this woman you brought into the house? Who is she? You're tarnishing the Hayes family name. Brandon froze. He slipped the phone into his pocket without a word. Jasmine noticed the shift in his expression but didn't ask, because she knew Brandon's kindness would not be readily accepted. After the rain, the sky can clear, but sometimes the dark clouds are merely hiding. Brandon had brought Jasmine and her two daughters into a completely new world, safe, warm, and full of comfort. But for Jasmine, every giggle from her daughters, every sheet scented with essential oils, only deepened her sense that she didn't belong there. And what she didn't yet know was that her presence was stirring an undercurrent within Brandon's family, a place that didn't easily welcome anyone from the fringes of society. Jasmine came down to the dining room with the two girls. Harper and Hazel chirped like sparrows, their eyes lighting up at the sight of the breakfast already set. Mommy, today, I want to play on the swing in the garden. All right, but eat first. Okay? Jasmine smiled, smoothing Hazel's hair. Brandon walked in holding a laptop tie still loose and unfastened. He paused quietly, watching the three of them. I have a meeting this morning, but afterward we can go to the store to pick up more supplies for the kids. Jasmine hesitated. Actually, I was thinking of looking for a job. I can't keep living here for free like this. Brandon set his laptop down on the table. Jasmine, you just got settled. Don't rush. Right now, you and the girls need rest and recovery most. But I'm not used to being taken care of, she said, her voice fading. Brandon looked straight into her eyes. This isn't being taken care of. This is a new beginning. Elsewhere, at another mansion in Manhattan, where Madame Lorraine Hayes, Brandon's mother, resided, a loud knock echoed at the door. Ma'am Ellie sent a recording along with a photo. With her neatly combed silver hair and posture straight as a soldier, Lady Lorraine opened the phone. The photo showed Brandon sitting beside Jasmine on the balcony, clearly visible, accompanied by an audio clip. Do you even know her past? She has 2 daughters. She used to beg on the street. We can't accept this. Lady Lorraine clenched her teacup tightly. To her family, honor outweighed even her son's happiness. After breakfast, Jasmine asked to help clean the kitchen. Even though the maid declined, she insisted on washing the dishes. I need to do something. I don't want my daughters thinking we live off pity. Mrs. Harper, the elderly maid, who had worked for the Hayes family for over 20 years, paused, looked at Jasmine for a long while, then nodded. You're a good mother. Maybe I misjudged you when we first met. Night fell. Jasmine sat before the mirror, brushing her daughter's hair. Mom, will we still be here tomorrow? Harper asked softly. It's a simple question, but it caught Jasmine in the throat. What if one day Mommy isn't here anymore? Jasmine asked back, as if testing how her daughter would react. Then we'll go with you. As long as we have you anywhere is home. Jasmine's heart tightened. She looked at the innocent faces of her daughters and made herself a promise. No matter what happened, she never let her children lose anything. That night, Brandon's phone rang. It was his mother. What are you doing, Brandon? Bringing some unknown woman into our home? Who is she? Brandon sighed, gripping the phone tightly. Mom, Jasmine isn't who you think she is. She's strong, kind, and she's been through hell to raise her kids. That makes it worse. You're getting involved with a woman with a scandalous past. What happens if the media finds out? I don't care about the media. I care about the person. Don't let her be the reason you lose everything. The call ended. Brandon sat in silence, surrounded by darkness. He knew the storm ahead wasn't just a possibility, it was inevitable. Jasmine woke up earlier than usual. She looked over at Harper and Hazel, still fast asleep. For many nights, she hadn't been able to close her eyes, because even though the room was warm, her heart still felt frozen. She went to the kitchen and prepared breakfast, not to prove anything, but to feel like she was doing something. Brandon passed by and saw Jasmine cooking breakfast for the entire mansion. He frowned slightly. Jasmine, you're not the help. You don't need to do this to say thank you. Jasmine didn't turn around. She just answered softly. I know, but if I don't do something, I feel useless. After breakfast, Brandon invited Jasmine to sit in the garden. You once said you wanted to work to support the girls, but have you ever thought about going back to school? Jasmine froze for a moment. Go back to school? I dropped out 10 years ago, and now I have 2 kids. Brandon looked straight into her eyes. I'm willing to pay for your tuition. Mrs. Harper can look after the girls. And if you study something you're passionate about, you won't just survive, you'll rise. Why do you believe in me so much? Jasmine asked quietly. Brandon smiled. Because you survived where most people gave up. What reason could I possibly have not to believe? That night, Jasmine sat on the bed looking at the online course materials Brandon had printed for her. It all looked easy, but even just turning on the computer felt terrifying for her. Who do I think I am, wanting to return to school? The same woman who once begged for leftover bread at the market. She folded the papers, about to put them aside, when Harper woke up. What are you doing, Mommy? You look sad. Jasmine lowered her head and hugged her daughter close. Nothing, sweetheart. Mommy's just thinking about how to be a better mom. The next day, Brandon received a message from his mother. So you're planning to pour money into a woman with no future. Be careful. Women like her are only good at playing the victim. Brandon didn't reply, but inside him a quiet fire of resistance had started to burn. If you can't believe in her, then at least believe in me. Because I've never felt this right about anything. That evening, a light rain began to fall. Jasmine stood under the awning, watching each droplet fall like small worries dripping inside her heart. Brandon stepped out holding an umbrella. Someone said, "You're not worthy. What do you think?" Jasmine gave a faint, sad smile. I don't need anyone's validation. But I do need to believe in myself first. Brandon handed her the umbrella. Then start with something small. Believe that you can go back to school for you, not to prove anything to anyone. That night, Jasmine sat in front of the computer, her hand resting on the keyboard. Harper and Hazel played nearby. What are you doing, Mommy? I'm signing up for a course, so that someday I can take care of you both on my own. Hazel hugged her mother. I don't need anything, just you, Mommy. Jasmine smiled, and for the first time in years, she clicked Submit. An online business course. A single click, but one that could change her entire life. When a woman chooses to rise for her children and herself, the world should step aside. But the road ahead of Jasmine wouldn't be paved with roses. Returning to school, catching up with technology, overcoming shame, facing the scrutiny from Brandon's family, it was all just beginning. If you've ever been afraid to start over, comment, I choose to rise. People can destroy your home money and your belief in yourself. But the moment you begin to learn again, you're taking it all back. Jasmine once sat on the pavement holding her daughters as they slept in the cold. Now she sat in a quiet corner of the mansion in front of the old laptop Brandon had given her and began a new journey. Not to get rich, but never to return to the place where she once broke down. Jasmine opened the Introduction to Business course on the first day. The first page was filled with dry terms, cash flow management, SWOT analysis, and market value. It all made her head spin. I don't understand any of this. Am I just too stupid? Jasmine whispered, almost ready to shut the laptop. Hazel sat beside her coloring a picture. Mom, your drawing's terrible, the little girl teased. Jasmine laughed, and in that small moment, she realized failure is temporary, but giving up is forever. Brandon would leave a cup of coffee every morning on her study desk. He didn't say much, just gently reminded me, just focus on learning. I'll handle the rest. He hired a private online tutor to help her understand complex concepts. He asked Mrs. Harper to play with the kids so Jasmine could have 2 to 3 quiet hours daily. And he never asked, how far along are you? He only said, I believe you'll make it. You'll bow. The first week, Jasmine cried because she couldn't understand how to build a financial plan. In the second week, she learned how to calculate net profit. She was drafting her first product description for a simulated class project by the third week. She printed it and taped it to the wall. Brandon walked in, picked up the paper, skimmed it, then looked up. If this were a real startup, I'd invest in it. Jasmine blushed, but for the first time a glimmer of pride sparkled in her eyes. Ellie, Brandon's sister, sent an email to their mother. See, she's using this whole I'm studying act to stay. Brandon even hired a private tutor. She's taking advantage of his kindness. Lady Lorraine read it, then nodded. If she thinks doing a few online assignments makes her worthy of this family's name, she's mistaken. One evening, Jasmine submitted her first essay, an analysis of a small business model designed for single mothers. The instructor replied, authentic and practical. This could be developed into a real business plan. Jasmine couldn't believe her eyes. She read the feedback 5 times. Harper hugged her from behind. "What are you writing, Mommy?" Something I once thought I'd never be able to write. After finishing her lesson late at night, Jasmine stepped outside to get some air. Brandon was sitting on the stone bench, a finance book left open in his lap. He looked up when he saw her. "Must be exhausting, huh?" "No, I feel alive." They didn't need to say more. They just sat beside each other in silence. A silence that no longer felt heavy, but peaceful. The next morning, Jasmine stood in front of the mirror. No makeup. But in her eyes there was no fear, only a flame being rekindled. She brushed her hair and put on the plain button-up shirt Brandon had given her, neat but straightforward. "I think Mommy's a teacher," Harper said, as she watched her mother prepare to study. "No, Mommy's a student, but someday I'll teach you too." Some wounds don't bleed, but all it takes is a name, a voice, and they cry out inside the heart. Troy Walker, the man who abandoned Jasmine when she told him she was pregnant, had vanished from her life as if he'd never existed. But the past is never easy to bury. Brandon had found him, and this time it wasn't for revenge. It was to demand justice for the woman he was growing to respect deeply. A high-end bar dimly lit. Brandon sat across from Troy, who was still slick as ever, but with colder eyes. "Why'd you track me down?" Troy sneered. Brandon didn't mince words. "Because you left behind two nameless children, a mother with no home, and an apology that was never spoken." Troy scoffed. "I didn't sign the birth certificates. They're not my responsibility. But they're your children." Brandon pulled a photo from his jacket pocket. Harper and Hazel laughing joyfully. "You walked away from this moment." "I didn't." That afternoon, Brandon returned home. Jasmine was folding toys for the girls. He hesitated, then said, "I met with Troy. I needed to understand why, and I needed him to know there's no place left for him to return to." Jasmine froze. She set the toy down on the table. Her eyes didn't meet Brandon's. "You shouldn't have done that. I just wanted to protect you." Jasmine trembled. "There are things I want to be buried forever." Bringing them up only hurts Brandon. Brandon said nothing. He only nodded, and quietly stepped back into the shadows, leaving Jasmine with a storm of emotions. That night rain drizzled steadily. Jasmine stood under the porch roof, arms wrapped around her head, as the pain came flooding back like crashing waves. Suddenly, an umbrella appeared over her. "Brandon." He said nothing. She just silently held the umbrella, standing by her side. No words of comfort, just presence. The next morning, Jasmine made the call to Troy herself. "I'm not calling to blame you. I'm calling to end this." Troy's voice was cold. "What else is there to say? That I used to wish you'd come back. But not anymore. Because these kids don't need a father who only knows how to create and abandon." Troy tried to respond, but Jasmine hung up. And for the first time, she didn't cry. Night fell. Brandon sat alone in the living room. Jasmine walked in. "I used to think you did all this out of pity." "No, I know. Now I know that someone is willing to protect me even when I didn't ask for it." Brandon smiled. "And now you're ready to protect yourself." "I am not a victim. I am a survivor. I am a mother. I am someone learning again from the beginning. And I don't need pity. I need a chance." She pasted that sentence on her laptop screen, so she would remember how far she had come every day, every hour. Brandon and Jasmine stood side by side, saying nothing. They watched the two little girls playing on the rain-kissed grass. Brandon finally spoke. "If I proposed right now, what would you say?" Jasmine looked up at him. "I'd say, not yet." And she turned away. But the smile hidden beneath her wet hair didn't escape him. Brandon let out a soft sigh. But there was no disappointment in his heart, only hope, a man who truly loves. is someone who dares to offer a ring, but he is also willing to tuck it back into his pocket and wait. Brandon was ready to say the words he had kept in his heart for months. But Jasmine, the woman who had once been abandoned without mercy, was she ready to believe in a promise? Brandon prepared a small picnic for Jasmine and the twin girls, Harper and Hazel, that day. Carefully wrapped sandwiches, fresh orange juice kept calm in a thermal bottle, and a checkered blanket spread beneath the gentle shade of a tree. Harper chattered about school while eating. Hazel rested her head on her mother's lap, and Brandon couldn't take his eyes off Jasmine. This scene, I used to dream about it, but I never thought it would be real, he said softly. Jasmine smiled faintly, but there was still doubt in her eyes. As the golden hues of sunset settled over the grass, Brandon sat beside Jasmine. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. No grand gestures, no stage. Just a straightforward question carrying his entire heart. Jasmine, will you marry me? Jasmine froze, as if time had stopped. Harper and Hazel watched curiously. She looked at Brandon, then at her daughters, and she gently shook her head. I'm sorry, but I'm not ready. Brandon nodded. No anger, no surprise. I understand. Jasmine spoke with a trembling voice. I used to think that everything would be easy if someone truly loved me. But it turns out, the hardest part isn't trusting you. It's believing that I deserve to be loved. She lowered her gaze, almost hiding from herself. I was left once. I don't want to walk into something new, while the old scars are still unhealed. That night, after the girls had fallen asleep, Brandon sat alone on the porch. Jasmine came out holding 2 cups of ginger tea. She sat beside him. I'm not rejecting your love. I'm just rejecting the version of me right now. Brandon smiled, gazing up at the stars. Then when you're ready, be the one to take my hand first. The next morning, Harper tugged on her mother's sleeve. Is Uncle Brandon going to be our dad? Jasmine paused. Hazel whispered, if you don't marry him, will you be sad, Mommy? Jasmine looked at her 2 girls born into abandonment, but raised in love. I'm not ready yet, but I'm learning how to love, and love takes practice, just like learning to ride a bike. Meanwhile, Brandon quietly developed a photo where Jasmine smiled brightly during the picnic. He placed it in a wooden frame on his desk. No pressure, no demands, just a reminder. She once said no, but she didn't give up on hope. People often think love begins with a yes, but sometimes it grows from a brave and honest not yet. He once pulled her from the streets. It gave her and her daughters a home, a future, and hope. But this time, the one needing a hand to hold was him, and the hand that would reach for his was the woman who once feared love and herself. Early in the morning, his phone rang non-stop. Headlines flooded every major outlet. Brandon Hayes, real estate tycoon, involved in internal data leak. Hayes Group, stock plummets. Boardroom in turmoil. Who's trying to dethrone Brandon? Brandon stared silently at the screen. His face didn't change, but inside, everything was beginning to collapse. That afternoon, Brandon was summoned to an emergency board meeting. His father and younger brother were among the attendees. Brandon, his father said coldly, you should step down temporarily, preserve the family's image. Brandon looked him straight in the eye. No one can prove I'm guilty. This is a smear campaign. We don't care about guilt or innocence. We care about reputation. And that woman Jasmine isn't fit to stand beside a Hayes. Make your choice, either the family or the woman who came with 2 fatherless children. Brandon rose to his feet, his voice steady. I choose the one none of you ever dared to see truly. Back at home, Brandon still smiled at Harper and Hazel, but Jasmine could feel something weighing on him. "Brandon, what's going on?" she asked once the girls were asleep. "I'm fine. Sometimes a man has to learn how to stand alone." "How long do you plan on standing alone?" Jasmine asked, looking deep into his eyes. For the first time, Brandon was silent for a long while, and then he rested his head on her shoulder. The next morning, dozens of reporters gathered outside the gates of the mansion. Is Brandon Hayes, tied to money laundering Jasmine Cole, once homeless, now a key suspect? Jasmine heard every word, each one like a blade, but this time she didn't run. The following day with Brandon, absent Jasmine took the initiative and appeared at a small press conference held by his legal team. No elaborate makeup, no glamorous dress, just an ordinary woman standing to defend the man she believed in. "Brandon Hayes once saved my daughters and me from the cold grip of death. But today I'm not here to speak about gratitude. I'm here to say that he never bribed, manipulated, or abandoned anyone. And I, a woman once buried in shame, will not stand by while the world tramples on a man who leads with his heart." The cameras fell silent. No reporters asked further questions. But social media exploded. The once homeless woman now protects a millionaire, Jasmine Cole, from victim to warrior. That night, Brandon sat alone in the dark. The TV replayed Jasmine's speech. He said nothing. He took off his watch, a gift from his father, and placed it on the table. That was when he let go of a family that had never truly chosen him, and chose instead the family his heart longed to protect. He had once been her pillar, but when he fell, she became the column he could lean on. This time, Brandon would be the one to speak first again. But the one to reach out her hand first would be Jasmine. Some proposals don't need a ring, just a glance. A hand reaches out when the other has nothing to hold on to. And sometimes the one who once said no is the very person who makes love whole. One afternoon, after the storm of scandals, Brandon sat beneath the tree where they once had a picnic. No phone, no laptop. He always carried just a pen and a notebook. Jasmine arrived, dressed in a simple white dress, her hands clasped together as if hiding something huge. "You once asked if you proposed again what I would say. Well, now you don't have to ask." Brandon looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. Jasmine pulled a small ring from the pocket of her dress. Simple, no diamond. "It's just a delicate silver band." She took his hand and placed the ring in his palm. "I don't have a beautiful past. No relatives to give their blessings. But I have 2 little girls who call you Uncle Brandon daily. And I have a heart that's now learned not to be afraid anymore. If you still want to be my husband and the father of these 2 children, then wear this ring. No words needed." Brandon stared at the ring. His hands trembled slightly, but not from hesitation. He slipped it onto his ring finger. No words. Just a gentle kiss on Jasmine's forehead. So tender, it was unlike anything he had ever known. The next day, Jasmine told her daughters, "Do you 2 want to be the ones who give us the rings?" Harper and Hazel squealed with excitement. In a small ceremony, no crowds, no press, just wildflowers and sunlight. The 2 girls handed Brandon and Jasmine a pair of simple wedding bands. Brandon bent down to look into their eyes. "I won't promise to be a superhero, but I promise I'll be here whenever you need me." Hazel nodded. "A hug from you is enough." Jasmine set the camera timer, then ran back to sit between Brandon and the girls. No poses, no stylized smiles. Just one tight embrace to say, "We don't need blood to be a family." That night, Brandon sat beside Jasmine as moonlight filtered through the curtains. "I once thought I had everything, until I lost it all. But when you asked if I still wanted this, I realized, from the beginning until now, All I ever wanted was you. Jasmine gently rested her head on his shoulder. Well, now you have me, and this time, I'm not going anywhere. We are born without choosing where we belong. But as we grow, we have the right to choose our family. Brandon, a millionaire, who once carried the Hayes name like a medal, he was now preparing for his wedding, without a single member of his blood family in attendance. Jasmine and her 2 daughters decorated the small garden behind the mansion. Hazel chose white daisies, while Harper preferred light purple lavender sprigs. There was no live band, no princess gown. Jasmine wore a soft lace dress, her hair tied back. Brandon wore a crisp white shirt, holding 2 small wedding bands tightly. I don't need anyone to witness this wedding, Jasmine said. I just need someone to remember that it happened. When it was time for the vows, Brandon looked down at Jasmine. I once had a powerful family, but no one ever asked if I was happy. You and Harper Hazel are the answer to all those years I lived without truth. From now on, this is the family I choose. I don't need approval. I don't need blood ties. I need love. Jasmine took his hand and nodded. I used to think I was a stain in the eyes of others. But you saw me as if I were something precious. I don't carry Hayes' name, but I promise to protect you like family. This is my home now, and we'll build it from scratch, whether the world accepts it. Harper and Hazel ran through the garden, tossing handmade paper petals into the air. Hazel whispered to her sister, "Is Uncle Brandon our dad now?" Harper nodded, holding her sister's hand. "Yeah, but we don't have to call him Dad. Let's call him the one who's always here." A few weeks after the wedding, Jasmine began feeling constantly tired. At first, she thought it was from work and caring for the girls, but a visit to the clinic froze everything for a moment. "Congratulations, Ms. Jasmine, you're pregnant." She burst into tears right then, but not the tears of fear from 6 years ago. These were tears of gratitude, because this time, she wasn't alone. That night, Jasmine walked over to Brandon, who was reading. She sat beside him, gently, took his hand, and placed it on her belly. "We're about to have one more member in our family." Brandon froze. Then he slowly knelt, resting his head against her stomach. "I don't know what to say. It just feels like the world I once dreamed of has finally come true." Some people spend their whole lives searching for a home. Not one built of bricks, concrete, or crystal chandeliers, but one made of children's laughter, of a hand on your shoulder when you're tired, and of a gaze that says the whole world is right here. It was a fabulous night, with a gentle breeze flowing through the mansion's windows. Brandon was reading a fairy tale to Harper and Hazel when Jasmine suddenly held her belly and winced. "I think it's time," she said, her breath growing short. Brandon didn't say a word. He lifted her into his arms and rushed her to the car. This time, it wasn't chaos like 6 years ago. It was the calm of a man ready to become a father truly. At the hospital, after hours of holding their breath, a newborn's first cry rang out. A healthy baby boy. Mother and child are both doing well. The doctor smiled. Brandon held the baby in his arms. He couldn't hold back the tears. "Hello, son. Welcome to the family I chose. And you are the greatest gift of all." Jasmine lay there, weak but smiling. She knew everything had been worth it. Harper and Hazel were brought in to meet their baby brother. Hazel gently touched his tiny hand. "What's his name, Mommy?" Jasmine looked at Brandon. He nodded. "His name is Chance, because he's the second chance we never thought we'd get." The mansion that was once silent like a cold castle now echoed with laughter, the patter of little feet, and the sweet scent of baby formula. Jasmine nursed the baby, while Brandon cuddled the 2 girls as they watched cartoons. Everything was simple, so simple that had they not walked through hell, They might never have known how to cherish a heaven like this. Brandon and Jasmine sat on a wooden bench behind the house one afternoon, watching the children play. "Do you remember the first time I saw you on that street corner?" Brandon asked. Jasmine nodded. "I felt like the lowest version of myself. Dirty, ashamed, invisible." Brandon squeezed her hand. "But I saw someone I wanted to protect forever. You thought you saved me." He chuckled softly. "But in the end, I realized you saved me from a life of lonely success and empty glory." That night, Jasmine wrote in the journal Brandon once gave her, "I used to be afraid of love, afraid of myself. But I've learned, home isn't where we're born. It's where our hearts are finally allowed to rest." Brandon, Jasmine, Harper, Hazel, and baby Chance. They weren't a perfect family, but they chose each other every single day. And that made their love something that never needed to be proven, only felt shared, only lived. If you've ever dreamed of a place like this, or are still searching for it, leave a comment. I believe everyone deserves a home like that. Thank you for staying with us to the very last moment of this story. If you'd like to hear more journeys like Brandon and Jasmine's, follow the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss the moments that touch your heart.